Can everyone give one more round of applause to The next talk is titled Approaching the Nonhuman, Navigating Art, Abjection, and Ambiguity for a Post-Natural Ecology. Please welcome Nina Boutin.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. And thank you Ruby for organizing this event. Okay, so I know my title seems really wordy, but I'm actually just going to be presenting the introduction to my capstone, which is what I find to be the most pressing problem for ecology. So let's get right into it. So, despite its ambiguous meaning, the elusive term nature has been consistently relied on by environmentalists. Yet many have pointed to the problematic implications of the idea of nature for humans and non-humans alike. Raymond Williams once remarked that nature is probably the most complex word in the English language. Indeed, the widespread use of the word has proven difficult because of its ability to reduce and generalize simultaneously. Timothy Morton identifies nature as a potentially infinite series of disparate fantasy objects: trees, waves, frogs, lightning, nature. As reference to the entire material world, nature has a neutralizing effect on the multiplicity of objects that it encompasses. It becomes the universal backdrop for our human dramas. The experience of nature has effectively cleaved our reality into two separate domains, one of nature and one of society. In a truly ecological culture that understands they are part of the environment, would there be a need for this dichotomy? The nature-society dichotomy establishes a hierarchical ordering of the two, which can be understood through Pierre Hadot's metaphor of unveiling nature. There are two re-emerging attitudes. The Promethean attitude seeks to force off nature's veil. It posits nature as an antagonist to human progress, as something to be dominated. The Orphic attitude consists of returning to a moment of lost harmony. There is a feeling that something is missing from society, and in order to fill that hole, we must return to Mother Nature. These two attitudes can be found in both scientific discourse, which reproduces belief in progress and technology, as well as romantic discourse, which valorizes the sublime spectacle of nature. Broadly speaking, romantic writers embrace the search for fulfillment from nature. These two attitudes are not mutually exclusive. They may very well succeed each other, coexist, or even combine. These contradictions can be seen throughout the 20th century environmental movement, especially in the works of American environmental writers. Following the creation of many national parks, wilderness became a scene of instruction for the recovery or creation of a supposedly more authentic identity, as well as a usually masculine self-creation and assertion. In Walden, or Life in the Woods, transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau embarked on a 2-year experiment living in the woods of Massachusetts. Often cited for its environmentalist politics, Walden has equally been noted for the combination of radicalism and self-absorption that is a common trait in American culture. His project, with its emphasis on self-reliance and independence, is an interesting example of the peculiar fusion of masculine Promethean assertions and Orphic attitudes that are alive and well in contemporary environmental rhetoric. Consider Sean Penn's biography film of the young Christopher McCandless, a middle-class college graduate who sets out on a hitchhiking journey into the Alaskan wilderness. Into the Wild reveals the streaks of heteronormative masculine performance typical of most nature writing. Despite Orphic desires of returning to Mother Nature, nature is meant in masculine terms. Nature means outdoorsy, rugged, physically capable and whole, and aggressively healthy. McCandless rigidly follows the classic script. Turning away from societal problems, he acts out masculine nature to enact a fantasy of rugged survival and self-mastery over nature. What is it about these manly nature expeditions? Looking to nature as an object of desire has manifest in escapism, a rejection of society with the expectation that nature will solve one's problems as a kind of therapy. To To the Orphic mind, a deep connection with nature props up the illusion that one is not a part of the destructive society that they so condemn. Their fantasy, in which they picture themselves as the exception to the rule, effectively grounds their belief in the healing power of nature. The Orphic subject is elevated and cured. They become, in their eyes, the ideal, even exemplary human being. In the Western tradition of individuality, it becomes a way for people to fetishize their difference from others. This is not an experience of nature as it is, rather, it is an imaginary experience of nature taking place in the person's mind. The Orphic Promethean dialectic not only promotes escapism, but real violence towards society. When the Orphic individual truly believes society has gone beyond the limits of nature and must pay the price for it, they enact their personal nature fantasy as a form of terror. Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, was known to have extensively read Thoreau. The artist James Benning even recreated Thoreau and Kaczynski's cabins to show the similarity between the two. While Thoreau simply encouraged others to follow in his footsteps, Kaczynski took violent action against society. He was not someone who misread nature-centered ethics. If anything, he took them more seriously than others. He was simply a conformist willing to take his Orphic beliefs to extreme measures. This is the dream of the Orphic mind, destruction of society in order to live in harmony with nature. So, clearly, nature has become an object of greed and desire. As Timothy Morton puts it, putting something called nature on a pedestal and admiring it from afar does for the environment what patriarchy does for the figure of woman. It is a paradoxical act of sadistic admiration. It is paradoxical because it claims to protect and honor nature while at the same time reducing it to an idealized state for the purpose of satisfying the individual's emotional investment in it. It is sadistic because these rugged nature adventurers enjoy and derive pleasure from reenacting the fantasy of either surviving nature or being annihilated by its forces. Nature is the ultimate fantasy of possession, and there is no common ground. Nature and society represent two antagonistic categories in which one must always dominate the other. Neither of these scenarios, which posit nature as inexhaustible, static, harmonious, and unchanging, can adequately supply a peaceful, nonviolent coexistence with other beings. So where do we go from here? Bruno Latour goes to the root of the problem, asserting that we face a crisis of objectivity rather than a crisis of nature. In the modern framework, society is viewed as a malleable historical force, while nature is largely accepted as ahistorical, posing an objective reality. Our general outlook has been predicated on the existence of a social world comprised of subjects and a natural world composed of objects. What then does this all have to do with nature? The problem lies in the distribution of agency between the subject and the object. They cannot exist on an equal playing field. There is no room for ambiguity. Therefore, the crisis of objectivity bears on all objects, not just those which the label natural has been conferred. The crisis of the object is at the root of ecological thinking, yet this is not apparent in environmental thought, which seems fixated on natural objects. In theory, the environmental movement has attempted to defend nature for nature's sake. However, in practice, the mission is carried out by humans and is justified by the well-being, the pleasure, or the good conscience of a small number of carefully selected humans, usually American, male, rich, educated, and white. In response to this realization, many have attempted to replace the white man with more diverse subjects. This multicultural approach is not sufficient. Simply moving the spotlight from one subject to another does nothing to erase the inherent problem of the subject position. It continues to situate the object in a fixed order below the subject. Latour asserts that multiculturalism acquires its right to multiplicity only because it is propped up by mononaturalism. Thinking ecologically, then, goes above and beyond thinking a plurality of subjects. It must try to shift the base upon which this plurality stands, redistributing its agency. Objects would then become less predictable and more ambiguous. It would mean embracing and interacting with emergent, tangled objects, with no clear boundaries, no well-defined essences, no sharp separation between their own hard kernel and their environment. In other words, the solidity of the subject-object relationship must be shaken or exposed in some way in order to reveal ambiguity and uncertainty. The crisis of objectivity points to a fundamental problem. How do we challenge the concept of nature as reducible, static, transcendent, and separate from social relations? At some point, we must turn away from the stories of nature that have been handed down to us, the conception of the mind as essentially a spectator, an enclosed interiority facing the world in a stance of inherent opposition and appropriation. We must attempt to redistribute the barriers dividing subject and object, artificial and natural, human and non-human, animate and inanimate. There is no final solution to the problem of ecology or the crisis of objectivity. Redistributing nature's agents will necessitate, perhaps paradoxically, doing less rather than doing more. This might mean not a moment of immediate action, but a moment of reflexive and deep critical thinking. Enacting significant systemic change is crucial if we are to enter an age, an ecological age, no longer confined by the idea of nature. Otherwise, we risk running in place, unaware of our predicament, seeking answers from nature. At this point, we know too much to keep restricting ecology to natural objects and those that advocate for their protection. Ecology implicates all of us, scientists, artists, politicians, economists, and moralists, not just the green environmentalists. Ecology without ideas of nature may seem cold and confusing at first, especially to the Orphic mind. Nonetheless, we may find an unusual sweetness in this after-nature moment. We may find that we are capable of accomplishing tasks of symbolic reordering, collective decision-making, and creative moral world-building. Thank you.